Have you ever given so much that you forgot where you ended and everyone else began? This is the story of Evelyn Monroe, a woman who gave her heart, her time, her money, and was still called an outsider by the very family she held together. Until one day they planned a luxury cruise to celebrate a milestone and told her she wasn't invited. What they didn't know was that Evelyn had paid for the cruise, and what came next wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning and a new beginning. The champagne flute trembled just slightly in my hand as I stood in the Monroe living room, smiling through the kind of silence that only came from being politely ignored. The room buzzed with excitement. Cruise brochures were spread across the oak coffee table like a fan of lottery tickets, and Linda Monroe's voice danced over the chatter like a tour guide already mid-speech. "It's the premium suite," she said, tapping the glossy page. "Private balcony, gourmet meals, even sunrise yoga on deck. Just imagine us watching the Caribbean sunrise on our 45th anniversary, together, as a family." I nodded, quietly sipping my drink. It was their moment. I wasn't going to make it about me. Tina, Nathan's sister, leaned in. "Oh, we should coordinate colors for dinner outfits. Tropical chic, maybe?" Linda beamed. "I love that. Tina, you always have the best ideas." Then Greg Monroe turned toward me, his smile polite, too polite. It was the one I'd come to recognize after 9 years in this family. The kind of smile that came right before something unpleasant was said. "Evelyn," he began, placing a firm hand on his knee, "we need to talk to you about the cruise arrangements." I lowered my glass and met his eyes. "Of course. What about them?" "Well," Linda chimed in, smoothing her skirt like she was rehearsing the next line, "we've decided that the cruise is for family only." I blinked. "Right. Nathan and I will—" "No, sweetheart," Greg interrupted, his voice still annoyingly gentle. "Blood family, just us, the original Monroes." The word hit like a slap. Blood. As if 9 years of holidays, hospital visits, and family reunions hadn't counted. As if I hadn't spent Christmas mornings helping Linda cook her signature ham, or driven Tina to urgent care when Austin was out of town. I inhaled slowly. "I see." "It's nothing personal," Tina added without looking up from her phone. "You're just not really a Monroe." My husband, Nathan, walked in from the kitchen just in time to hear that last part. "What's going on?" he asked. "We're telling Evelyn about the cruise," Linda replied smoothly. "It's just a family celebration." Nathan hesitated. I waited for him to say something, anything. Instead, he shrugged. "It's their anniversary, Ev. Their choice." Their choice. Like I was a guest tagging along. Not his wife. Not someone who had shared his bed, his life, and his family for nearly a decade. I forced a smile. "Of course. Your celebration, your rules." Greg nodded approvingly, like I'd passed a test. "Knew you'd understand. Besides, someone needs to house sit while we're gone. Water the plants, keep an eye on things." I looked down at my phone, then back at him. "Happy to help." I scrolled quickly through my contacts. They probably thought I was texting a reminder or setting up a calendar note. "Royal Caribbean VIP desk," I said, voice calm and clipped as I brought the phone to my ear. "Yes, this is Evelyn Monroe, account 981442. Greg's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Yes, that's the $27,000 booking. Caribbean Dream Voyage, the 8-person premium package." I paused. "I'd like to cancel the entire reservation." The room went quiet. Dead quiet. Linda gasped. "You can't do that." "I just did," I said, still on the phone. "Yes, full refund to the card on file, please." I ended the call, then turned to face the room, my in-laws frozen in confusion, Tina's mouth slightly open, and Nathan, expression unreadable. "That was your cruise?" Greg said, his voice rising. "No," I said simply. "That was my cruise, paid for with my year-end bonus, the one from the company you all call her little computer hobby." I lifted my glass again, finished the last sip of champagne, and smiled. "Don't worry, now the whole family can stay home, together." And with that, I walked toward the door, leaving behind their stunned silence and years of polite rejection. The flute may have trembled, but I didn't. The hallway echoed with the soft click of my heels as I left the Monroe house. I didn't slam the door, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. Sometimes silence makes the loudest statement. I didn't go home right away. I drove around the neighborhood for a while, letting the cold night air clear the heat rising in my chest. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind buzzed. Anger, disbelief, and something else. Relief. For once, I hadn't swallowed it down. I'd drawn a line, a real one. I pulled into a quiet cafe on Hawthorne and slid into a corner booth, ordered a chamomile tea I wouldn't drink, then opened the folder I'd kept hidden on my phone for years, a folder titled Monroe Expenses. Not because I was keeping score, because I was keeping proof. 9 years ago, when Nathan and I got married, I never imagined I'd need it. But after the third loan, Greg forgot to pay back, and the fourth emergency Tina had at 2 a.m., I started documenting. Not for them, for me, to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. I scrolled through the entries. $2,300, Tina's credit card debt consolidation, 2017. Don't tell Austin, it would hurt his ego, she'd said. $14,000, destination wedding in Hawaii, 2018. I paid for the resort when the deposit fell through. They toasted Nathan for being a reliable son. $6,800, Greg's emergency roof repair, 2019. We'll pay you back in a few months. They never did. $200, Linda's elective surgery deductible, 2020. She sent me a candle afterward, lavender vanilla, and on it went. By the time I totaled it, the number sat heavy in my chest, $229,450. That didn't even include birthdays, baby showers, or the endless little things I chipped in for while they praised Nathan's stability. All while they called me an outsider. My phone lit up with a message from Nathan. We need to talk. I turned the screen over. It wasn't that I regretted helping. I did it because I thought that's what family did, that giving quietly was love in action, that eventually they'd see me as more than just the girl who works with computers. But tonight made it clear they never had. I pulled up another file, the email confirmation from Royal Caribbean. I'd booked the cruise 6 months ago, a surprise, a thank you for finally welcoming me. Except they never really had. They'd just gotten used to what I gave. And when I stopped giving, suddenly, I was dispensable. The irony? They wouldn't even have that cruise if I hadn't sacrificed my entire bonus, money I could have used for my own dreams. A kitchen remodel, a trip to Tuscany, a baby fund, 2 miscarriages, and still no nursery. Just orchid rooms and Caribbean fantasies that didn't include me. I stared out the cafe window. Families walked by, bundled in coats, laughing under strings of golden lights. I wondered what it would feel like to belong without conditions, without needing to buy your seat at the table. My phone buzzed again. Tina. What the hell, Evelyn? That was our cruise. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a blank email to myself and typed 4 words. No more invisible giving. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about finally understanding. Family isn't defined by DNA or holiday photos. It's defined by who shows up, not just to take, but to see you, stand beside you, and say, you matter, you belong. And tonight, for the first time in 9 years, I'd shown up, for myself. I arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Portland just after 9. The doorman opened the grand brass-framed doors with a warm, "Welcome, Ms. Monroe," as if I belonged there, not like a +1, not like a placeholder. Just me, standing tall in my dark navy coat, rolling one small suitcase behind me. The irony? This was the honeymoon suite I had reserved for Greg and Linda. A panoramic view of the city skyline, velvet drapes, fresh orchids on the nightstand, everything picked with care. I'd even paid extra for the welcome champagne and handwritten card. Now I was the one sipping that champagne. Alone. And for the first time, that word didn't feel so bitter. I had just hung my coat when my phone vibrated again. Nathan. I let it ring. Then a text popped up. I'm in the lobby. Can we talk? I stood frozen for a moment, then typed back. Room 2112. A knock came 10 minutes later. Nathan stepped in looking like a man who had run through a storm, hair disheveled, jacket half-zipped, eyes tired. The same clothes from dinner, the same confusion, but something in his posture had changed. Less indifference, more something close to fear. Ev, he began, but stopped short, eyes scanning the suite. This is... The room I booked for your parents, I said, pouring another glass. Since I wasn't family enough to join, I figured I'd use it. He didn't smile. I'm sorry, he said, stepping forward. I didn't know. Didn't know what? I asked, not moving. That they excluded me? Or that I was the one who funded their dream trip while they pretended I didn't exist? He flinched. Both. I let the silence hang, let him feel the weight I'd carried for 9 years. I've been so blind, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. They always made you feel like a guest in your own marriage, didn't they? They didn't have to, I said, voice low. You did that for them, every time you stayed quiet. He winced. You're right. I never defended you the way I should have. I thought keeping peace with them was the same as keeping peace with us. It wasn't peace, I said, stepping closer. It was betrayal in slow motion. He nodded, swallowing hard. Can I see it? See what? The receipts, he said. Everything you've done, everything you paid. I stared at him, then slowly handed him my phone, open to the folder. He sat on the edge of the bed and scrolled, line after line, year after year. I watched his face pale. 230,000, he whispered. This is real? As real as Linda's fake tears or Greg's guilt trips. He looked up, eyes glassy. You've been holding all of this alone. I nodded. Because I thought one day you'd notice. I thought love meant waiting. And I thought love meant not rocking the boat, he said, voice cracking. Turns out we both were wrong. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out. I need to fix this. I raised a brow. You can't undo 9 years in one night. I know, but I can start by telling them the truth, all of it, and telling you, officially, finally, that you are my family, not by blood, but by choice, the most important choice I ever made. I didn't respond right away. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but also, for the first time, a little hopeful. Then start with this, I said. Tomorrow, you call them, on speaker, and you tell them everything, what I did, what I meant, what you now see. And tonight? He asked quietly. I held out the second flute of champagne. Tonight you stay, on the couch. We're not skipping over this. We're working through it. He took the glass, eyes locked on mine. Deal. As we clinked glasses, the city lights sparkled behind us. Not a happy ending. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a real one. Morning crept in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in pale gold. Nathan was still asleep on the couch, his arm flung over his eyes like he was shielding himself from a truth that finally found him. I sat by the small writing desk in a silk robe, laptop open, coffee untouched. The night had been long, full of raw truths, quiet tears, and moments where we didn't speak, just sat side by side in the silence of what had been left unsaid for too long. It's funny, people think betrayal always comes loud, with shouting, slammed doors, broken dishes. But mine came slowly, gently, even, in the sound of someone clearing their throat before skipping your name in a toast. In a mother-in-law introducing you as Nathan's wife, she does something with marketing. In a husband who said, let's not get into it right now, for 9 years straight. The worst betrayals are the ones dressed in calm. I opened the spreadsheet again. The numbers didn't shock me anymore. I'd stared at them so many nights they felt like old ghosts, familiar, but still unwelcome. What surprised me now was the journal I'd kept alongside it. Not just the dollars, but the reasons. March 2016. Tina called crying. She and Austin missed a payment. I paid it. She promised they'd pay me back before summer. October 2017. Linda's knee surgery. Insurance only covered part. I wired the money before they even asked. May 2020. Greg's car broke down. Nathan was out of town. I took him to the dealership and co-signed the loan. I remembered each moment, how I justified it to myself. They'll see me differently after this. They'll say thank you this time. They'll finally treat me like I belong. But they never did. And maybe the saddest part? I stopped expecting them to. Nathan stirred. You're up early. Habit, I said without looking. My team in Berlin has Monday calls at 6 a.m. He rubbed his eyes. Still thinking about last night? I turned to him. You're asking that like it wasn't every night, Nathan. For years. He sat up, defeated. You're right. I closed the laptop. Do you know how many times I almost walked away? He looked up sharply. Not because I stopped loving you, I added, softer now, but because I stopped loving who I became in this marriage, the quiet wife, the ATM, the outsider who pretended she didn't hear the digs or feel the absence. Nathan's eyes welled up. I didn't see it. You didn't want to, I replied, because if you had, you would have had to choose, and you weren't ready to do that. Silence settled again, but this time it was a different kind, less heavy, more honest. I want to be ready now, he said finally. Not just say I'm sorry, but show it, with action. I nodded slowly. Then we start with boundaries. Agreed. No more money without both of us deciding together. Of course. And I want a post-nuptial agreement, full financial separation unless we agree, together, to support someone. Nathan didn't flinch. You'll have it. And counseling. He smiled faintly. I already looked up 2 therapists before you woke up. I almost laughed. You really did? I figured if I want to fix what I've broken, I should probably stop guessing and start listening. I studied him. The man who once laughed along with his mother's passive-aggressive jokes, who nodded silently when I was excluded, who now sat in front of me asking not for forgiveness, but for a path forward. Maybe that's the beginning of healing. Not grand apologies, but finally being heard. He reached for my hand. Do you still want to be in this with me? I looked at his fingers wrapped around mine. I want to be seen, respected, included. And if you can give me that, then yes, I still want us. He breathed out like he'd been holding it in for years. I squeezed his hand. But today, you're making the call, on speaker. Nathan nodded. I will, and I won't hold back. And just like that, the man who had been silent for far too long stood up, ready to speak. Nathan sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand, staring at it like it might burn him. Are you sure you want me to do this now? He asked. Yes, I said calmly, sitting across from him, legs crossed, coffee in hand. You said you're ready. Prove it. He took a deep breath and hit speaker. The phone rang once, twice, then, Daniel? Did you talk some sense into her yet? Greg's voice, sharp, impatient. Nathan looked at me, then back at the phone. Dad, he began, voice firm. I need you to listen, really listen. There was a pause on the other end. I want to make something clear. Evelyn is not just my wife, she's my family, my primary family. And what happened last night? The exclusion, the disrespect, it stops now. Linda's voice broke in, high and indignant. Oh, please, Nathan. She overreacted. It was supposed to be a special family cruise, not a courtroom drama. Nathan didn't waver. It was a family cruise, Mom, which makes it worse, because the only reason we were even going was because Evelyn paid for it. Every cent. You think Dad's pension covered a $27,000 cruise? Silence. She what? Greg's voice was lower now, not angry, just stunned. Yeah, Nathan said, his tone hardening. You know that bonus I said I got last year? That was her bonus, from her job. The job you keep calling her little computer thing. She's the CMO of a tech company with 60 employees. I watched Nathan transform before my eyes, his spine straight, his voice sharp, and finally, his loyalty pointed in the right direction. She's been covering for you for years, he continued. Roof repairs, wedding deposits, Tina's credit cards, Amy's down payment, even your mortgage. She did it all because she believed family helped family, and you called her an outsider. We didn't know, Linda whispered. I didn't either, Nathan admitted, because I chose not to look, and that's on me. But now I know, and I won't be silent anymore. There was a long pause, the kind that sits heavy on your chest. We'll pay her back, Greg said stiffly. No, I spoke for the first time. I don't want your money. I want something you've never given me. What's that? Linda snapped. Respect, I said. Real, honest respect. I've earned it, and if you can't give me that, then we have nothing left to talk about. More silence. Are you seriously choosing her over your own family? Greg said, his voice rising. Nathan didn't miss a beat. No, I'm choosing my marriage. I'm choosing the woman who stood by me for 9 years while you pretended she didn't exist. I'm choosing the only person who ever acted like family when it counted. Linda tried again, her voice cracking. But she never fit in. She never understood our way of doing things. She understood more than you think, I said, voice steady. She understood giving without being asked, showing up without being wanted, and staying silent for too long. Greg's voice dropped to a near growl. If you walk away from this family, Nathan, don't bother coming back. Nathan looked at me, then back at the phone. Then I guess I won't be back, he said. Not unless things change, not unless you change. And with that, he ended the call. For a moment, the suite was utterly still. Nathan let out a shaky breath and collapsed back onto the bed. I can't believe I just did that. I walked over and sat beside him. It needed to be said. He nodded. That was terrifying. I smiled. That was overdue. We didn't speak for a few minutes, just sat in the echo of what had been broken, and what maybe had just begun to heal. Later that afternoon, as the sky turned slate gray and rain kissed the windows, Nathan looked at me with something deeper than apology in his eyes. Can we talk more tonight? About everything? Money, therapy, even trying again. For us. I nodded, heart swelling, not with hope, with choice. My choice. Let's start over, I whispered. 3 weeks passed. Not in a whirlwind of apologies or grand reconciliations. No. The Monroe family didn't work that way. They worked in silences, in carefully crafted distance, in waiting things out and hoping time would erase what was said. I didn't wait. Nathan and I started couples therapy that week. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., a room with beige couches, a therapist named Mark who didn't flinch at hard truths, and a husband who, for the first time, listened more than he defended. We talked, really talked, about our marriage, our grief, the 2 babies we'd lost and never grieved together, about the weight of unspoken expectations, about the price I'd paid, not in dollars, but in self-worth. Nathan cried during our second session. I didn't. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I'd already mourned the version of our life where I stayed quiet just to belong. And then, the phone rang. Linda Monroe. I hesitated before answering. I could already imagine her voice, tight, sugar-dipped disappointment wrapped in entitlement. I picked up. Evelyn, she said, her voice far too sweet. We're having a little trouble with the mortgage this month. Our usual source of help isn't available, I finished for her. Yes, I gathered. Silence. Have you considered speaking with a financial advisor, Linda? I hear they're very helpful, especially for outsiders. She hung up. I laughed, out loud, in the middle of my kitchen with a spatula in one hand and the satisfaction of 9 years finally flipped back in mine. Nathan walked in just as I tossed the call aside. Was that? I nodded. She asked for help. I declined, politely. He raised a brow. And how do you feel? Like I finally stopped bleeding money into a black hole of resentment. Good, he said, leaning in to kiss my forehead. Because we've got other things to spend it on. He pointed to a small manila envelope on the counter. What's this? I asked. Postnup, he said, with the clause you asked for. No gifts, no loans, no bailouts, unless we both agree. I opened it slowly, heart catching in my throat. His signature was already there. You didn't even question it? I'm done questioning your boundaries, he said. They're ours now. 2 months later, a different call came. Greg Monroe. His voice sounded different this time, lower, older. Evelyn, he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't say anything. We both do. We were wrong. About a lot of things. Linda and I would like to take you and Nathan to dinner. Our treat. And I mean that. Actually, our treat. Not yours. I exhaled. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. I didn't forget the years of dismissal, the way they used words like family as a weapon while draining me dry. But I also knew something shifted. not just in them, but in me. That night, over dinner at a small bistro near the river, Linda handed me a card. Inside was no money, just a note. "We see you now. We're sorry it took so long." I wasn't naive. This wasn't the end of dysfunction. But it was a beginning, a choice to rebuild, not because they deserved it, but because I did. A few weeks later, Nathan and I booked a new cruise, not Caribbean. This time we chose a quiet retreat through Alaska's fjords, just us, a second honeymoon, one we both chose, not to fix something broken, but to honor what we were rebuilding. As we boarded the ship, I glanced at the souvenir rack and smirked. I picked up a postcard, scribbled a note, and mailed it back to the Monroe house. "Wish you were here, but only if you really mean it, because that's the thing about family. It's not about who shares your name, it's about who shares your weight." The breeze off the Alaskan coast was brisk, salty, and honest. I stood on the balcony of our suite, wrapped in a soft wool shawl Nathan had insisted I pack. The ship cut gently through icy water, glaciers looming in the distance like quiet gods. Behind me, our room glowed with warm yellow light. Soft jazz played. Room service sat untouched, lobster bisque and lemon tart. We were too busy talking. Yes, still talking. It had become our new ritual, to say everything. No more small silences that turned into walls. Nathan stepped out, carrying 2 mugs of tea. He handed me one without a word, then rested his elbows on the railing beside me. "I don't think I've ever seen you this calm," he said. "Me neither," I replied. He sipped. Then, after a pause, "You know, they've asked twice now to have us over for dinner. Just us. Just family." "And?" "I told them we're not doing anything until you feel ready." I smiled quietly. "I might be. Not for them, but for us. So that if we do walk back in, it's on our terms." Nathan turned to me then, really looked. "I used to think you belonged on the edge of our family," he said. "Like someone we were lucky to have, but only if you stayed quiet, agreeable, convenient." His voice caught for a second. "But I see now, you were never on the edge. You were the core, the only one holding things together. You're the reason we didn't fall apart sooner." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a charm, shiny, modest, shaped like a compass. "I saw this in the gift shop," he said. "The woman said it was for finding your way home. I thought, maybe you should have it." I took it carefully. It was simple, but the weight of it in my hand felt profound. "I found my home," I said softly. "Not in your family, not even in this marriage, but in the moment I stopped asking to be accepted and chose to accept myself." Nathan nodded. "And now?" "Now, I let people earn access to me," I said. "I don't pay admission anymore." We stood in silence for a while. Below us, the sea shimmered under a pale moon. Behind us, the bed was unmade. The windows steamed from our laughter, our conversations, our small, imperfect steps forward. And then, at dinner that night, the couple at the next table struck up a conversation. "You two newlyweds?" the woman asked, smiling. Nathan smiled. "Something like that." He turned to me, placed his hand gently on mine, and said with steady, unwavering pride, "This is my wife, Evelyn. She's the best thing that ever happened to our family." Our family. 2 words I had waited almost a decade to hear spoken like that, with conviction, with clarity, without anyone flinching afterward. I didn't need the cruise anymore to prove anything. I didn't need the approval, the seat at the table, the titles, or the empty toasts. What I had now was better. I had choice. I had voice. I had a man who finally stood with me, not just beside me. And for the first time, I looked out over a vast ocean and didn't feel like I was drifting. I was anchored. I was home. I belonged. Sometimes belonging isn't something you're given. It's something you choose to no longer beg for. Evelyn didn't destroy her in-laws. She didn't scream. She didn't burn bridges. She simply stood up, drew a line, and chose herself, finally. And in doing so, she didn't just reclaim her voice. She reminded us all that respect isn't a gift, it's a requirement. Because love without respect isn't love, and family without boundaries is just a system of silent debt. If you've ever felt like the outsider in someone else's story, maybe it's time to start writing your own. Welcome to Sweet Revenge Happy Ending, where the power is quiet but unstoppable.